I went to a party with my wife's lover's wife, and what happened next was unbelievable. My revenge. Betrayal cuts deep, but revenge tastes sweeter when it's served at the very table where lies were first celebrated. The night I walked into that party with my wife's lover's wife, no one knew what was about to unfold. When Daniel discovers his wife's secret affair, his world shatters, but instead of rage, he chooses strategy. Teaming up with the wife of his wife's lover, he walks into a high society party where secrets, lies, and betrayals are about to be exposed in the most shocking way imaginable. The discovery: Daniel Hayes had always believed his marriage was built on trust. For 12 years, he and Emily had been the couple others admired: steady, elegant, the picture perfect pair who showed up at parties smiling in sync. To the outside world, they had everything: a beautiful suburban home just outside Boston, 2 cars parked neatly in the driveway, and a marriage that seemed untouched by the cracks that pulled others apart. But trust is fragile. Sometimes it shatters in silence before you even realize it's breaking. It started with a phone call Daniel wasn't meant to hear. He had come home early from work one Thursday, worn down from a brutal day of meetings. As he stepped inside, he heard Emily's voice drifting from the kitchen. She was laughing, a kind of laugh he hadn't heard from her in years. Soft, playful, almost girlish. He set his briefcase down and froze at the corner of the hall, just out of sight. "I miss you already," Emily whispered into her phone. "Tonight was perfect. I wish he hadn't come home so soon last time. We'll have to be more careful." Daniel's blood turned to ice. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. At first, he told himself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she was talking to a friend. Maybe it was an inside joke. But then she said the name. "Good night, James." James. Daniel staggered backward, gripping the wall as though it were the only thing holding him upright. He knew that name. James Caldwell, Emily's colleague. The man who always lingered too long at barbecues, who shook Daniel's hand with a smug smile that now seemed drenched in secrets. His chest tightened. The air felt heavier with every second. He wanted to storm into the kitchen, rip the phone out of her hand, demand the truth. But something stopped him. Something colder, sharper, more calculating than rage. He stayed silent. Later that night, when Emily slipped into bed beside him and kissed his cheek, Daniel pretended to be asleep. Her perfume lingered in the dark, and for the first time in 12 years, it made him sick. The following week was torture. Daniel watched her carefully, noting every glance at her phone, every unexplained late meeting, every text she smiled at before turning the screen away. His world was unraveling, yet she behaved as though nothing had changed. One evening, unable to hold back, Daniel opened her laptop while she showered. The screen glowed with proof he didn't want but couldn't deny. Emails, hidden in a folder labeled Work Travel. "Last night was unforgettable. I wish we didn't have to hide. Can't wait to see you again. E." Dozens of messages like that. Some short and suggestive, some long and heartfelt, each one another nail in the coffin of the life he thought he had. When Emily came out of the shower, humming to herself and drying her hair, Daniel closed the laptop and sat motionless on the edge of the bed. He stared at the floor, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. He wasn't sure how long he sat there, but one thought pulsed louder than all the rest. She betrayed me, and she thinks I don't know. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, while Emily's soft breathing filled the room. He thought about the years he had given her, the sacrifices, the long hours at work, the vacations postponed because of her career. He thought about the way she used to look at him, as if he were her whole world. And he thought about James, a man who had slipped into his life like a parasite, feeding on everything Daniel had built. But Daniel wasn't a man who broke things in rage. He was a man who fixed, who strategized, who waited. And as dawn crept into the room, he made a promise to himself. He wouldn't just confront Emily. He wouldn't scream or beg or throw everything away in a fit of anger. No, he would make them both pay. Not with fists, not with violence, but with something far more devastating: revenge. The first step was information. Daniel spent the next week following Emily's movements, careful not to raise suspicion. He tracked her calls, memorized her schedule, even drove past James Caldwell's office once just to see the man's smug face again. Every detail mattered. But then something unexpected happened, something that would change the course of his plan forever. On a gray Saturday morning, Daniel was standing outside a cafe downtown, watching from across the street as Emily slipped inside. He expected James to follow, but instead, a woman sat down at her table. Daniel almost turned away, assuming it was just a friend, until the woman's face caught the light. She was beautiful, elegant in a quiet way, her expression calm but tired, as though life had weighed her down. She leaned across the table and said something that made Emily stiffen, then lower her gaze. Daniel's pulse quickened. He knew who she was: Claire Caldwell, James's wife. Daniel didn't move until Emily left the cafe, her face pale, her steps hurried. Then Claire stood, adjusted her coat, and walked in the opposite direction. For a moment, their eyes met across the street. There was no recognition. Why would there be? But in that single glance, Daniel saw something: sadness, betrayal, and beneath it, the same simmering anger that burned inside him. It struck him then with perfect clarity. He wasn't alone in this. Emily had betrayed him. James had betrayed her. And together, maybe, just maybe, they could turn betrayal into the sharpest weapon of all. Daniel smiled for the first time in days. The game had begun. The other woman. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Claire Caldwell. There was something magnetic about her presence. Calm, composed, but unmistakably sharp. The way she had glanced at him across the street, sorrow and anger flickering behind her eyes, told him she understood pain he hadn't even shared yet. He knew he had to meet her, not by chance, by design. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A charity gala was announced for one of Boston's elite causes. Both Emily and James were expected, and Claire's name was on the guest list. Daniel purchased his ticket under a business alias and arrived early, observing the crowd. When Claire entered, the room seemed to shrink around her. She moved with grace, greeting acquaintances. Yet there was a tension he recognized, the same tension he carried inside. Daniel, approached her quietly. "Mrs. Caldwell?" he asked softly. She froze, then turned, measuring him with wary eyes. "Do I know you?" she asked, voice cautious. "I don't think so," Daniel said, offering a faint, reassuring smile. "But I know your husband." Her expression hardened. "What is this about?" "I know about James and Emily," he whispered. Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. You know?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Yes, and I think we could help each other." Her gaze lingered on him, suspicious, yet intrigued. In that moment, Daniel realized he had just found an ally, someone who wanted justice as much as he did. The pact, by the end of the evening, over quiet drinks in a secluded corner, Daniel and Claire shared their stories. She told him about James's repeated betrayals, the small lies, the long absences, and the way he had betrayed her trust just as Emily had betrayed Daniel's. He shared his heartbreak, the discovery, and the pain that had consumed him for the past week. "You're serious," Claire said, her voice trembling slightly. "You want revenge?" "Not just revenge," Daniel corrected. "Justice. They need to feel the weight of what they've done." They formed a pact. Claire would provide insider knowledge about James's habits, the parties he attended, and the people who mattered to him socially. Daniel would orchestrate the plan. Careful, meticulous, patient. It was a dangerous alliance, but necessity demanded risk. In that moment, Daniel realized revenge wasn't just sweet, it was an art, planning the stage. For the next week, Daniel and Claire became conspirators. They met in cafes, parking garages, and quiet streets, sharing information and plotting the perfect exposure. "James throws one of the largest parties in Boston," Claire explained one afternoon. "He always invites people he wants to impress. High society, investors, friends, everyone." "Perfect," Daniel said, rubbing his hands together. "That's where we'll reveal them, publicly, where it hurts the most." They discussed every detail, the timing, the optics, the evidence, photos, messages, subtle manipulations of conversations. Every element was crucial. For the first time since discovering the affair, Daniel felt alive. The thrill of strategy, of anticipation, replaced the searing pain he had felt for days. This was no longer about betrayal. It was about control. Masks of politeness. The night of the party arrived. The Caldwell mansion glowed like a beacon of opulence. Guests in gowns and tuxedos mingled in the vast hallways, glasses of champagne in hand, laughter echoing against marble floors. Daniel and Claire entered together, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. To the world, they were simply two elegantly dressed strangers, perhaps a new couple attending the party. To each other, they were allies in a game of exposure. Emily was there, radiant in a sapphire gown, laughing beside James. Daniel's stomach churned, but he kept his composure. Claire squeezed his hand, subtle reminder that they were united. As they moved through the crowd, exchanging polite nods and smiles, Daniel felt the first spark of anticipation. The masks everyone wore, the smiles, the laughter, the polite chatter would soon fall, and when they did, nothing would be the same. Tension in the air. The party hummed with life. Crystal chandeliers cast dazzling reflections across the marble floors, and soft jazz filled the corners of the Caldwell mansion. Daniel and Claire moved with calm precision, mingling, noting reactions, and carefully positioning themselves. Every step, every glance was part of the plan. Emily, unaware of the storm brewing behind her, laughed at James's jokes, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Daniel's stomach twisted, but he forced a polite smile, pretending to enjoy a casual conversation with a wealthy investor. Claire leaned in, whispering, "They think tonight is just another glamorous night. They have no idea what's coming." Daniel nodded. Tension was everywhere, the kind of tightrope tension before a fall. He caught snippets of whispered gossip, careful to plant small seeds, a well-timed compliment here, a deliberate comment there, each one nudging Emily toward vulnerability. By the end of the hour, both Daniel and Claire had observed patterns. Emily's eyes darted toward her phone repeatedly. James's laughter was slightly forced, and both seemed oblivious to the fact that their world was quietly unraveling. Secrets and whispers as the evening progressed. Subtle shifts in energy rippled through the room. Daniel moved closer to the center, carrying himself with quiet authority, while Claire lingered near the refreshments, catching casual remarks from guests. "They're too perfect together," one socialite whispered to another. "Something feels off." Daniel smiled faintly. Off indeed. He intercepted a server, exchanging a few whispered words. In moments, Claire had access to photographs and snippets of conversations that Emily and James had sent, unknowingly left on their devices while distracted. These small details, texts, emails, hidden messages, would later serve as undeniable proof. By now, guests were exchanging glances, sensing a subtle tension that hadn't been there before. The laughter was slightly hollow, the smiles slightly forced. The cracks were beginning to show, and Daniel savored the sight. The toast, Daniel waited for the opportune moment. With champagne in hand, he stepped onto a small dais near the grand staircase, drawing the attention of several guests. Murmurs filled the room as he cleared his throat. "I know I'm new to this group," Daniel began, voice steady, "but tonight made me realize something important. Appearances can be deceiving. What people show is not always the truth." A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. Emily and James stiffened, their attention snapping toward him. "I've learned that some secrets are best revealed in plain sight, because hiding behind smiles and laughter doesn't erase betrayal." He raised his glass slightly, eyes flicking to Emily. The room was silent now, every guest sensing the weight of his words. Claire moved closer, her hand brushing against his, a quiet reassurance that the plan was in motion. The unveiling. With a swift motion, Daniel tapped his phone. A projector flickered to life, displaying screenshots of texts and emails between Emily and James for all to see. Gasps erupted around the room. Emily's face drained of color, her hand flying to her mouth. James froze, caught in the glow of their own secrets. The guests whispered, pointing, murmuring, shock spreading like wildfire. "James," Daniel said, voice calm but cutting, "you've spent months lying to everyone here, including the person who trusted you most." Emily tried to speak, to explain, but the evidence was irrefutable. Claire stood beside Daniel, holding her head high, a silent testament to her own resilience and pain. The elegant facade of the evening crumbled. The couple who had seemed untouchable was now exposed, humiliated in front of friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. The collapse. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Emily fled to a quiet corner, tears streaming down her face, while James tried to salvage what remained of his dignity. Guests whispered, some offering sympathetic glances to Daniel and Claire, recognizing the courage it took to reveal such deception. Claire confronted James quietly, her voice cold, deliberate. You lied. You betrayed. You destroyed what we trusted you with. And now, everyone knows. Daniel approached Emily, his expression a mixture of sorrow and resolve. This isn't just about you, he said softly. It's about truth, and you chose to hide behind lies. Outside, the city lights twinkled, oblivious to the drama inside the Caldwell mansion. But inside, nothing would ever be the same. The night had ended for James and Emily, their empire of lies crumbling in the glare of public exposure. And to Daniel and Claire, they walked away from the chaos, united by shared betrayal and the quiet satisfaction of justice served. The aftermath. The morning after the party, the aftermath hung over the city like a storm cloud. Boston's social scene buzzed with gossip, messages, and shocked calls. The revelation of Emily and James's affair had spread faster than anyone anticipated. Daniel sat in his study, sipping black coffee, scrolling through screenshots of news and social media reactions. Claire's messages popped up, updates from the party, confirmations of whispers, subtle public shaming, and the ripple effects of their careful plan. Are you sure we did the right thing? She asked over the phone. Her voice, calm yet edged with emotion, betrayed her lingering doubt. Daniel smiled faintly. Justice isn't always easy, but yes, we did the right thing. They discussed the fallout. Emily had retreated from social functions. James faced disciplinary scrutiny at his company, and both were isolated from the very circles they had used to hide their deceit. Daniel realized that the first phase of revenge, public exposure, had succeeded brilliantly. The shattered glace. Week later, Daniel received an unexpected invitation, a private gathering at one of James's corporate offices. Curiosity piqued. He attended with Claire, sensing another opportunity. The office was sleek, glass walls and minimalist furniture, reflecting the cold precision of James's corporate world. Daniel and Claire entered quietly, observing James pacing. You think this ends with the party? James spat, his face red with anger. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Daniel remained calm. Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. And so do you. Tension escalated until a small object, a glass paperweight, flew across the room, shattering against the wall. It was symbolic. James's control, his empire of lies, finally breaking. Claire stepped forward, her voice steady. We've given you every chance to make amends. You chose betrayal instead. In that moment, Daniel realized revenge wasn't about violence. It was about dismantling power, piece by piece, rebuilding power. The following weeks were a renaissance for Daniel. His reputation, once quiet and reserved, began to rise. Friends and colleagues admired the subtle strength he displayed, the way he had confronted betrayal with intelligence and dignity. Claire, too, regained her confidence, stepping into her own social sphere with elegance and power. Together, they became an unspoken force, partners in strategy, allies in life, proving that unity born from adversity could be unstoppable. Meanwhile, Emily and James struggled to regain their footing. Invitations dwindled, business opportunities disappeared, and their circle of influence shrank. Daniel watched from afar, satisfaction tempered by the knowledge that the consequences were fair, not cruel. The final blow, the ultimate act of revenge, was not public humiliation or whispered gossip. It was financial. Using insights Claire had gathered from James's corporate dealings, they ensured a strategic exposure of mismanaged funds and ethical violations. James faced legal scrutiny, forcing him to step down from his position. Emily's attempts to salvage her social image failed, leaving her isolated and humiliated. Daniel and Claire watched the news unfold together, glasses of wine in hand. "We've closed every door they had," Daniel said quietly. Claire smiled. "Not just closed, we rebuilt ours stronger. It was not malice, it was justice, and it tasted sweeter than any anger-fueled revenge could." New beginnings. Months later, Daniel and Claire sat together in a quiet cafe, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The world seemed lighter, calmer, filled with possibility. "Do you ever think about them?" Claire asked softly. Daniel shook his head. "No. What's past is past. We have our own lives now." They had survived betrayal, executed justice, and emerged stronger. Trust had been shattered, but it had been rebuilt, not in old relationships, but in a new alliance forged in fire. The sun filtered through the cafe windows, casting a golden glow across their table. For the first time in months, Daniel felt peace. He reached across, taking Claire's hand. "We're free," he said, and in that moment, the past felt truly behind them, replaced by a future of choice, strength, and unshakable alliance.